Alright, tubes, what is going on? I'm working on a little project here, and I just came across something kind of interesting. I actually learned something. I was trying to do some research here and figure out what the problem I was dealing with was, and I couldn't really find anything that led me to what I eventually discovered here. So I figured I ought to make a video on this. Now, what I'm working on here really can actually apply to any modern vehicle. So just because what I'm working on here specifically is this 2003 Honda Odyssey. But just because I'm working on this, if this isn't what you're working on, doesn't necessarily mean that it's not applicable. So keep watching. One thing I do want to make a note of is if you're watching this video and your vehicle runs, you might as well stop here. I don't want to waste your time. If your vehicle runs, what I'm about to show you will definitely not be the problem. So this Honda Odyssey here I picked up, and I got it from the previous owner, who told me that it had a code, a P0340 code, P0340. And what that code points to is a problem with the cam position sensor circuit. Now, if you have that code on your vehicle, it doesn't necessarily mean that the cam position sensor is bad. It could be a problem with the wiring, there could be a faulty connector, corrosion, something like that going on. But considering that this is a relatively old vehicle with high mileage on it, I decided that the best thing going forward would be to start with the cam position sensor itself. I found one pretty cheap online, and despite the current state of teardown here, I figured a way to actually replace it without removing the timing cover, timing belt, sprocket, valve cover, any of that. Unfortunately, upon replacing that cam position sensor and putting everything back together, I was still in the same place I started. The vehicle did not run at all, and it was still throwing a P0340 code. Now, the fact that the P0340 code was being thrown in the first place basically told us that the reading being given to the computer by the cam position sensor didn't make sense, and that's why the code was thrown in the first place. Now, that could pretty much mean one of two things. Number one is that there's no reading at all, and that could be due to a bad sensor, faulty wiring, a bad connection, anything that means that the signal from the cam position sensor isn't making it to the ECU, and that causes the code to be triggered. However, the second thing that could cause that code is a sensor signal that doesn't make sense. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say for the sake of argument that the engine is turning, but the reading from the cam position sensor is not. You're not getting a reading, or it's too slow, or it's intermittent, or something like that. So even though it's getting a signal from the cam position sensor, it just doesn't make any sense with readings from other sensors like your tachometer, crank position sensor, whatever. Like if your crank position sensor shows that the engine's rotating, but your cam position sensor shows that the engine is not rotating, something weird is going on. So considering that idea, my dad made the suggestion to me that I ought to pull the timing cover off this engine and take a look at the timing belt. He suggested maybe something happened to the timing belt. And I realized that was a very good idea, because this vehicle was given to me in non-running condition, and all I was told was that it broke down on the side of the road and threw that P0340 code. I didn't know how it broke down, if it made a loud noise, if there was smoke, flames, you know, anything. All I knew is that the vehicle didn't run. So upon removal of the timing belt cover, what I actually found is that the timing belt was slipping on this cam here. As you can see, I've removed it, and you'll see why in a minute. I want to do a demonstration. But when I actually removed the cover, the timing belt was still sitting on this sprocket, so it looked okay. But upon closer inspection, I noticed that the surface of the belt itself looked very worn, almost burnt or melted, and there was a very low amount of tension on the belt, much less than I would expect, almost to the point where I could lift it up and slide it right off of the tensioner, which you can see I ultimately ended up doing. So upon making this discovery with the seemingly loose timing belt, I basically did a little bit more diagnosis and testing, and came to the conclusion that there's currently holes in, I would say, at least 3 of the 6 pistons in this engine, and it's trash. I'm going to make another video showing how I determined that, and basically a warning on why you should always perform timing belt maintenance on your vehicle. But in the meantime, the real moral of the story here is that sometimes the cause of a P0340 code is not necessarily bad wiring, not necessarily a bad cam position sensor. If you're getting that code, you could have a timing belt issue as well. If you find yourself in a situation like I did where you've already replaced your cam position sensor with a brand new one, you know it's good, maybe you even tested your cam position sensor and you're sure that that's not the problem, your wiring checks out, none of the connectors look like they're corroded or have any damage to them, check your timing belt. As I said in the beginning of the video, if your engine runs, then it's probably not your problem. But if you're like me and the engine doesn't run at all, there is a very good possibility that you may have a problem with your timing belt. So hopefully this video was helpful. I figured I would make it because it wasn't really something that had occurred to me until my dad came up with the idea of checking the timing belt. So if anybody's got any questions, be sure to let me know. And also stay tuned, I'm going to do a video showing how I did a compression test and a couple other different things, and I actually confirmed that this thing is totally done. The engine's shot in this particular vehicle. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Later.